Now Weber goes into a little bit of detail, of historical detail, of these different markets and their uneven outcomes being important in different ways at different times in history. For example, he remarks that, and this is on page 170 on the left-hand column, towards the very bottom. He writes that the great shift, which has been going on continuously in the past and up to our times, may be summarized, although at a cost of some precision. The struggle in which class situations are effective has progressively shifted from consumption credit toward first competitive struggles in the commodity market, and then toward wage disputes in the labor market. So he continues. The class struggles of antiquity, so very long ago, to the extent that they were genuine class struggles and not struggles between status groups, were initially carried on by peasants and perhaps also artisans. So independent producers. Okay, so these were not wage laborers, independent producers who were threatened by debt, bondage, and struggling against urban creditors. So these were struggles against the price of money, being highly indebted, not being able to pay back loans at a very high interest, at usury interest. Okay. And then the propertyless of antiquity and the Middle Ages protested against monopolies, preemption, forestalling, and the withholding of goods from the market in order to raise prices. So they were really struggling against the operation of commodity markets, where those who are selling commodities would withhold goods from the market in order for exorbitant prices to result and the profits to increase from them. So you would have food riots, for example, in the Middle Ages. People rioting against the price of food. Of course, incidentally, this is a very current issue. As you probably are aware, food prices have increased across the board in the world, and we actually have food riots in many parts of the world. So this is still something current, but Weber says that this was the predominant form of class struggle among the propertyless in antiquity and in the Middle Ages. Of course, this is because there was not yet any labor market, any wage labor system. Okay? So he continues that today, in our capitalist society, the central issue is the determination of the price of labor. So struggles for better wages. Okay? Of course, this has to do with the fact that, of course, now the social context that capitalism has created, a world of wage labor, where social relations between capital and labor are organized through as labor markets. That's how capitalism operates. The transition is represented by the fight for access to the market and for the determination of the price of products. Such fights went on between merchants and workers in the putting out system of domestic handicraft during the transition to modern times. Since it is quite a general phenomenon, we must mention here that the class antagonism that are conditioned through the market situations are usually most bitter between those who actually and directly participate as opponents in price wars. So these are really price wars in this case, for our contemporary period, wars about the price of labor, how much labor should be valued and paid for. And now comes the curious issue that Weber discusses in just a few lines. It is not the rentier, the shareholder, that's when contemporary terminology, those who are holding all the stocks and the credit instruments that are causing our current economic implosion. It's not the rentier, the shareholder, and the banker who suffer the ill will of the worker, but almost exclusively the manufacturer and the business executives who are the direct opponents of workers in wage conflicts. Because, of course, wages are negotiated between employers and workers, even though deeper down that those wages are structured by the broader economic situation, by capital markets, okay, by how much manufacturers themselves will have to pay for capital. Yeah. This is so in spite of the fact that it is precisely the cash boxes of the rentier, the shareholder, and the banker into which the more or less unearned gains flow, rather than into the pockets of the manufacturer or the business executives. This simple state of affairs has very frequently been decisive for the role the class situation has played in the formation of political parties. For example, it has made possible the varieties of patriarchal socialism and the frequent attempts, formally at least, of threatened status groups to form alliances with the proletariat against the bourgeoisie. What Weber does here, he offers us an explanation for two phenomena. First, he offers us an explanation of why class struggle is so relatively infrequent in history. This is because class situation per se does not necessarily make people realize that they do have shared economic interests. Yeah, it takes certain cultural conditions for that to happen, for people to realize that their class situation is structured by the economic order, structured by a system. It doesn't happen arbitrarily. And this happens very infrequently. Second, he offers us an explanation of the fact that when class action does take place, when we do see class struggle based on economic interests, it often brings together people with quite different class situations. Very ironic. Okay? It's very paradoxical that often class action does take place, but does not necessarily pit those against each other who really have different class situations. So this explains some curious combinations of constituencies for even the different parties in today's American landscape, the Republicans versus the Democrats. Okay? Good. So the next issue that we'll come to is Weber's discussion of status and how it differs from class.